The lobby of the plush Rosemont Hotel was abuzz with the sounds of luggage wheels on marble floors and the chatter of well-heeled guests when Karen strode in, her designer handbag swinging from her arm. Dressed in an impeccable power suit, she radiated an air of entitlement as she approached the front desk, her eyes narrowing at the hapless young receptionist. "I specifically requested a suite with a view, and this is completely unacceptable," Karen snapped, slamming her palms on the counter. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The receptionist, Sophie, blinked in surprise, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Ma'am, I'm terribly sorry, but all of our suites are currently booked. We can certainly—" "I don't care about your excuses," Karen interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "I want to speak to the manager. Now." Sophie swallowed hard, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment as the other guests in the lobby turned to stare. "I can call a manager for you, but—" "Don't bother," Karen spat, already striding away. "I'll find him myself." Marching across the lobby, Karen spotted a well-dressed man standing near the concierge desk and approached him, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sharp. "Are you the manager of this hotel?" The man, who turned out to be the hotel's executive chef, blinked in surprise. "No, I'm not the manager, but I can certainly—" "Well then, where is the manager?" Karen interrupted, her hands on her hips. "I have a serious complaint that needs to be addressed immediately." The chef, sensing the growing tension, held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but I can assure you that the manager will be happy to assist you. If you'd like, I can have someone fetch him for you." Karen let out an exasperated sigh, rolling her eyes. "Fine, but make it snappy. I have a very important meeting to attend, and I don't have time to waste on incompetent staff." As the chef hurried off to find the manager, Karen surveyed the lobby, her gaze landing on a group of hotel staff who were quietly conversing near the elevators. Narrowing her eyes, she strode over to them, her expression thunderous. "You there!" she barked, causing the staff members to jump in surprise. "I need my bags brought up to my room immediately. And make it quick. I don't have all day." The staff, taken aback by Karen's demanding tone, exchanged bewildered glances. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're not the bellhops," one of them, a young woman, said hesitantly. "You'll need to speak to the concierge about your luggage." Karen scoffed, her lip curling in disdain. "Don't give me that nonsense. You're hotel staff, aren't you? Now, get my bags and take them to my room." Chop, chop. The young woman opened her mouth to protest, but before she could speak, a voice cut through the tense silence. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Karen whirled around to find the hotel manager, a polite but firm expression on his face. "I'm the manager, and I'd be happy to assist you with your request," he said, gesturing for the staff to return to their duties. "However, I must insist that you refrain from giving orders to my employees. They are not your personal servants." Karen's eyes narrowed, her nostrils flaring. "I beg your pardon. Do you have any idea who I am?" The manager's expression remained neutral. "I'm afraid I don't, ma'am. But I can assure you that we take all guest concerns seriously, regardless of who you are. Now, how can I help you today?" Karen's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed as if she might explode. But then, a strange, calculating expression flickered across her face, and she plastered on a sickeningly sweet smile. "Well then, let's start over, shall we?" she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm Karen Brashaw, and I'm here on an important business trip. As I mentioned to your staff, I'd like my bags brought up to my room immediately. And I'd also like a complimentary bottle of champagne as a gesture of goodwill for the misunderstanding." The manager studied her for a moment, a faint crease of concern appearing between his brows. "Of course, Miss Brashaw. I'll have someone take care of your bags right away, and the champagne will be delivered to your room shortly." As the manager turned to relay the instructions, Karen's smile widened, a triumphant glint in her eyes. It seemed she had managed to get her way after all. Little did she know, however, that her entire exchange with the staff had been caught on camera by a nearby guest. A video that would soon go viral, exposing her true colors to the world. As Karen sauntered towards the elevators, a self-satisfied smirk on her lips, she failed to notice the concerned glances the hotel staff were exchanging. They had all witnessed her confrontation with the manager, and the young woman she had berated was still visibly shaken. "I can't believe she just got away with that," the woman, whose name was Samantha, whispered to her colleague. "Did you see the way she treated us? It was like we were dirt beneath her feet." The colleague, a middle-aged man named Enrique, nodded grimly. "I know, and the manager just let her have her way. It's not right." He paused, his brow furrowed in thought. "You know, I bet if someone had recorded that whole thing, it would have gone viral in no time." Samantha's eyes widened, and she glanced around the lobby cautiously. "You're right. Wait a minute. I think I saw a guest with their phone out during the confrontation. Maybe they caught it on camera." Enrique's face lit up with a mischievous grin. "Well, let's see if we can find that footage, my friend. If that woman thinks she can treat us like servants and get away with it, she's got another thing coming." The two employees set off, weaving through the crowd of guests with purpose. Meanwhile, Karen was completely oblivious to the brewing storm as she rode the elevator up to her suite, her mind already focused on the meeting she had to attend. As the elevator doors opened, Karen strode down the plush-carpeted hallway, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She approached her suite and swiped her key card, pushing the door open with a flourish. Finally, some peace and quiet, she muttered, tossing her bag onto the nearest chair. Glancing around, she took in the spacious living area, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Not bad, I suppose. Suddenly, the sound of a champagne cork popping caught her attention, and she turned to see a young hotel employee carefully pouring the bubbly into a crystal flute. "Ah, there you are," Karen said, putting on her most charming smile. "Excellent work, my dear. Just leave the bottle on the table, and you can be on your way." The employee, a young man named Liam, hesitated, his brow furrowing slightly. "Actually, ma'am, I was instructed to deliver the champagne and ensure you were satisfied with the service." Karen's smile faltered, and she let out an exasperated sigh. "Well, I'm satisfied, so you can go now. I have a very important meeting to prepare for." Liam shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting around the suite. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm not allowed to leave until you've had a chance to enjoy the champagne. It's part of our VIP service." Karen's eyes narrowed, and her expression darkened. "Listen here, young man. I don't have time for this nonsense. I am a very important businesswoman, and I demand that you leave me be this instant." Liam hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Ma'am, I really must insist." "I said leave." Karen snapped, her voice rising in volume. "Do you have any idea who I am? I could have you fired with a single phone call." Liam's face paled, and he quickly set the champagne flute down on the table, his hands trembling slightly. I'm very sorry, ma'am. I'll leave you be." As Liam hurried out of the suite, Karen let out a triumphant huff, smoothing her hair back into place. "That's more like it," she muttered, pouring herself a generous glass of champagne. "Now to focus on this meeting." Little did Karen know, however, that her exchange with Liam had also been captured on camera, and the video was quickly making the rounds among the hotel staff, who were determined to see that her entitled behavior was exposed. As Karen sipped her champagne, savoring the bubbles, she felt a sense of satisfaction wash over her. She had managed to get her way, as she always did, and now she could focus on the critical business meeting she had to attend. Glancing at the clock on the mantel, She let out a frustrated sigh. Where is that car service? I can't be late for this. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and she set down her glass, striding over to pull it open. Finally, about time. The words died on her lips as she found not the car service, but 2 hotel employees standing in the hallway, expressions stern. Ms. Bradshaw, we need to have a word with you, Enrique said, his tone clipped. Karen's eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms over her chest. Excuse me? I don't have time for this. I have a very important meeting to get to. This won't take long, Samantha interjected, her gaze unwavering. We just wanted to express our disappointment in the way you've been treating the hotel staff. Karen scoffed, rolling her eyes. Oh, please, don't tell me you're here to lecture me. I'm a paying guest, and I expect to be treated with the utmost respect. Respect is a two-way street, Miss Bradshaw, Enrique said, his voice calm yet firm. You can't just demand it. You have to earn it. And from what we've seen, you've done nothing but belittle and disrespect our colleagues. Karen's face flushed with anger, and she opened her mouth to retort, but Samantha cut her off. We've also heard that you threatened to have one of our employees fired. That's completely unacceptable, and we won't stand for it. How dare you? Karen started, but Enrique raised a hand, silencing her. We're not here to argue, Ms. Bradshaw. We're here to inform you that your behavior has been recorded and shared among the staff. And if you continue to mistreat our colleagues, we'll have no choice but to take further action. Karen's eyes widened and her jaw tightened. You can't be serious. Do you have any idea who I am? Samantha's expression hardened. We know exactly who you are, Ms. Bradshaw, and we don't care. This hotel has a reputation for excellence, and we're not going to let someone like you ruin that. Karen's mind raced, trying to process the implications of what they were telling her. She had always been able to get her way through intimidation and sheer force of will, but now it seemed that the tables had turned. This is outrageous, she exclaimed, her voice shrill. I demand to speak to the manager immediately. Enrique and Samantha exchanged a knowing glance. The manager is already aware of the situation, Enrique said, and I can assure you, he's not happy about it. Karen's face paled, and she felt a surge of panic rising within her. She had never encountered resistance like this before, and the thought of her entitled behavior being exposed to the world was suddenly terrifying. This isn't over, she hissed, her eyes narrowing to slits. I'll make sure you both lose your jobs for this. Samantha shook her head, a hint of pity in her eyes. You just don't get it, do you? This isn't about us. It's about the way you've been treating people. And believe me, the consequences of your actions are going to be far more severe than you can imagine. With that, the 2 employees turned and walked away, leaving a fuming Karen in their wake. As the door to her suite slammed shut, she felt a sense of dread settle in the pit of her stomach. She had always prided herself on her ability to manipulate and control, but now, it seemed that her reckless behavior had finally caught up with her. Karen paced back and forth in her suite, her mind racing. The confrontation with the hotel staff had shaken her, and she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of her stomach. This can't be happening, she muttered, running a hand through her perfectly coiffed hair. I'm Karen Bradshaw, for God's sake. I don't get humiliated like this. Crossing the room, she snatched up her phone and began furiously typing, her fingers flying across the screen. She needed to get in touch with her lawyer, her PR team, anyone who could help her get out of this mess. As she waited for her call to connect, a knock on the door made her jump. Steeling herself, she yanked it open, fully prepared to unleash her fury on whoever dared to disturb her. But the sight that greeted her made her words catch in her throat. Standing in the hallway were 2 uniformed police officers, their expressions neutral. Ma'am, I'm Officer Hernandez, and this is my partner, Officer Ramirez. We've received a complaint about your behavior towards the hotel staff. We'd like you to come with us to the station for questioning." Karen's jaw dropped, and she felt a surge of panic rise within her. "Questioning? What is the meaning of this? I've done nothing wrong." Officer Hernandez raised a hand, his tone calm but firm. "Ma'am, we've been made aware of several incidents where you've allegedly mistreated the hotel employees. We have video evidence, and we need to investigate further." Karen's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out of this predicament. "This is outrageous. I'm a respected businesswoman, and I demand to be treated with the utmost respect. You can't just—" "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us," Officer Ramirez interrupted, his voice brooking no argument. "If you refuse, we'll be forced to place you under arrest." Karen's face paled, and she felt her knees go weak. This couldn't be happening. She was Karen Bradshaw, a woman accustomed to getting her way through sheer force of will. The thought of being arrested and questioned like a common criminal was simply unthinkable. Reluctantly, she nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine, I'll go with you. But I assure you, this will not be the end of this." As the officers led her down the hallway, Karen could feel the eyes of the hotel staff burning into her back. She refused to make eye contact, her pride too wounded to bear the sight of their triumphant expressions. Once they reached the police station, Karen was ushered into a small, sterile-looking room where she was questioned for what felt like an eternity. The officers grilled her about her interactions with the hotel staff, and she found herself growing increasingly defensive and combative. "This is all a misunderstanding," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "I'm a paying guest, and I had every right to demand the level of service I expect." The officers, however, remained unswayed. "Ma'am, the video evidence clearly shows you berating and threatening the hotel staff. That's not acceptable behavior, no matter who you are." Karen opened her mouth to retort, but the words died on her lips as she realized the futility of her situation. For the first time in her life, she was facing real consequences for her actions, and the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. As the officers continued to question her, Karen felt a sense of dread and humiliation wash over her. She had always been able to manipulate her way out of trouble, but this time, it seemed that her reckless behavior had finally caught up with her. And as the full weight of her actions began to sink in, Karen couldn't help but wonder just how much damage she had done, not only to her own reputation, but to the lives of the people she had so callously disregarded. As Karen sat in the sterile interrogation room, her mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions. Panic, fear, and a deep sense of humiliation all vied for dominance, leaving her feeling uncharacteristically off balance. The two police officers, Hernandez and Ramirez, continued to question her, their expressions stoic and unwavering. Karen had always been adept at manipulating people, but in this moment she found herself floundering, her usual confidence and bravado crumbling. "Ma'am, I'll ask you again. Can you explain your behavior towards the hotel staff?" Officer Hernandez's voice was calm, but there was an underlying edge of sternness that unsettled Karen. Swallowing hard, Karen straightened her posture, desperately trying to regain her composure. "I don't understand why I'm being interrogated like a common criminal. I'm a respected businesswoman, and I simply expect a certain level of service from the hotel." Officer Ramirez leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "That may be, but the video evidence we've seen shows you berating and threatening the staff. That's not acceptable, regardless of your social or professional status." Karen's jaw tightened, and she felt a surge of indignation. "That video doesn't tell the whole story. I'm sure those employees were incompetent, and I was merely trying to ensure that I received the level of service I paid for." The officers exchanged a weighted glance, and Karen felt a pang of unease. "Ma'am, we've spoken to several of the hotel staff, and their accounts corroborate the video footage. They describe a pattern of abusive and demeaning behavior on your part." Karen's heart sank, and she felt a familiar sense of panic rising within her. This is ridiculous. I demand to speak to my lawyer immediately. Officer Hernandez nodded, his expression unreadable. We'll arrange for that, but first, we need to understand the full extent of your actions. The hotel has filed a formal complaint, and we're investigating potential charges of harassment and abuse. The words hit Karen like a physical blow, and she felt her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Charges? Abuse? This was all so far beyond what she had anticipated. Her entire world, built on a foundation of privilege and entitlement, was suddenly tilting on its axis. Charges? You can't be serious, she stammered, her voice trembling. This is all just a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can resolve this amicably. Officer Ramirez shook his head, his expression grave. I'm afraid it's not that simple, ma'am. The hotel staff have been deeply affected by your behavior, and they're not the only ones. We've received several other complaints from guests who witnessed your interactions. Karen's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out of this nightmare. She was Karen Bradshaw, a woman accustomed to getting her way through sheer force of will. The thought of facing real consequences for her actions was almost inconceivable. This can't be happening, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm ruined. As the realization sank in, Karen felt a wave of crushing despair wash over her. For the first time in her life, she was truly powerless, her entitled behavior and callous disregard for others coming back to haunt her in the most devastating way. In that moment, Karen knew that her world would never be the same again. The consequences of her actions were about to catch up with her, and she had no idea how she would ever recover. As the reality of her situation sank in, Karen found herself overwhelmed by a sense of panic and desperation. She had always been in control, manipulating her way through life with a combination of wealth, charm, and sheer force of will. But now those tactics seemed woefully inadequate in the face of the looming consequences. Pacing the small interrogation room, Karen wrung her hands, her manicured nails digging into her palms. There has to be something I can do, she muttered under her breath, her mind racing. I can't let this ruin me. The sound of the door opening drew her attention, and she whirled around to see a familiar face. Her personal attorney, Richard Donovan, striding into the room with a grim expression. Karen, what on earth have you done? Donovan asked, his voice tinged with exasperation. Karen straightened her posture, her eyes narrowing. Richard, thank goodness you're here. This is all just a misunderstanding, and I need you to fix it. Donovan sighed, shaking his head. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Karen. The hotel has filed a formal complaint, and the police have evidence of your abusive behavior towards the staff. Karen felt her stomach clench, and she fought the urge to lash out. That's ridiculous. I'm a paying guest, and I have every right to demand the level of service I expect. That may be true, Donovan conceded, but you can't just berate and threaten the staff. That's harassment, and it's unacceptable, regardless of who you are. Karen's jaw tightened, and she could feel the familiar heat of anger rising within her. I don't care what you or anyone else thinks. I want this all to go away, and I want it to happen now. Donovan regarded her with a measured expression, his brow furrowed. Karen, I understand that this is difficult for you, but the reality is that you've done some serious damage. The hotel is seeking legal action, and the police are investigating potential charges. The blood drained from Karen's face, and she felt her knees go weak. Charges? Legal action. This was all spiraling so far out of her control, and she had no idea how to stop it. You have to do something, Richard, she pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation. I can't let this ruin me. My reputation, my business. Everything I've worked for is on the line. Donovan's expression softened, and he placed a hand on Karen's shoulder. I'll do what I can, Karen, but you need to understand that there may be consequences for your actions. The best thing you can do right now is cooperate fully with the authorities and try to make amends. Karen recoiled, her eyes widening in horror. Amends? You want me to apologize to those pathetic employees? Absolutely not. I did nothing wrong. Donovan sighed, shaking his head. Karen, this isn't about you anymore. It's about the damage you've done to others, and the only way to begin making that right is to take responsibility for your behavior. Karen felt a surge of panic rise within her, and she opened her mouth to protest, but the door to the interrogation room opened once again, and Officer Hernandez stepped inside. Ms. Bradshaw, we're ready to proceed with the formal charges, the officer said, his expression solemn. Karen's heart pounded in her chest, and she felt her world begin to crumble around her. This couldn't be happening. It was all just a bad dream, a cruel twist of fate. But as she looked into the officer's unyielding gazes, she knew that there was no escape. The consequences of her actions were finally catching up with her, and Karen had no choice but to face them head-on. As the police officers read out the charges against her, Karen felt a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. She had never imagined that her entitled behavior could lead to such serious consequences. Ms. Bradshaw, you are being charged with harassment, abuse of power, and disorderly conduct, Officer Hernandez stated, his tone grave. The hotel staff have provided substantial evidence of your mistreatment, and several guests have come forward with additional complaints. Karen's mind raced, desperately searching for a way to defend herself. This is ridiculous. I'm a respected businesswoman, and I was simply trying to ensure that I received the level of service I paid for. Officer Ramirez shook his head, his expression stern. That's not an excuse for your behavior, ma'am. You cannot demand respect by belittling and threatening others. That's not how the world works. Karen felt a surge of indignation, her hands clenching into fists. Do you have any idea who I am? I have powerful connections, and I won't stand for this kind of treatment. Donovan, who had been quietly observing the exchange, stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Karen's arm. Karen, I understand you're upset, but threatening the officers will only make this situation worse. We need to focus on finding a way to resolve this constructively. Karen glared at her attorney, her lips pressed into a thin line. Resolve it? How exactly do you propose we do that, Richard? I'm facing criminal charges. Donovan sighed, his expression grave. I know, and the best thing we can do right now is cooperate fully with the investigation. The more you fight this, the worse it's going to get. Karen felt her heart racing, the walls of the interrogation room suddenly closing in around her. Cooperate? You want me to just roll over and accept this? She shook her head vehemently. I won't do it. I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm not going to let this ruin my life. Officer Hernandez cleared his throat, drawing Karen's attention. Ma'am, I understand that this is a difficult situation, but the evidence against you is overwhelming. Your only option at this point is to cooperate and try to make amends. Karen's eyes narrowed, and she could feel a familiar surge of defiance coursing through her veins. Make amends? You want me to apologize to those pathetic employees? Absolutely not. I don't care what kind of evidence you have. I'm not admitting to anything. Donovan placed a hand on Karen's shoulder, his expression pleading. Karen, please. This isn't about you anymore. It's about the damage you've done to others, and the only way to begin healing is to take responsibility for your actions. Karen pulled away from her attorney, her face flushed with anger. I don't care about any of that. I just want this to go away, and I want it to happen now. The officers exchanged a weighted glance, and Officer Ramirez stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm afraid that's not an option. The charges against you are serious, and we're moving forward with the investigation. Your best course of action is to cooperate and seek legal counsel. Karen felt her world crumbling around her, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. She had always been able to manipulate her way out of trouble, but this time it seemed that her reckless behavior had finally caught up with her. As the officers led her out of the interrogation room, Karen could feel the weight of her actions bearing down on her. She had never imagined that her sense of entitlement could lead to such devastating consequences, and the realization left her feeling utterly powerless. In that moment, Karen knew that her life would never be the same again. The consequences of her actions were about to change her forever. As Karen sat in the back seat of the police cruiser, her mind reeled with a mixture of disbelief and despair. She had always been a master of manipulation, able to bend the world to her will with a well-placed word or a generous donation. But now, her carefully constructed facade had crumbled, and she was forced to confront the consequences of her actions. The drive to the courthouse was a blur, and before she knew it, Karen found herself standing in front of a judge, her attorney by her side. The charges against her were read aloud: harassment, abuse of power, and disorderly conduct, and the reality of her situation began to sink in. "How does the defendant plead?" the judge asked, his gaze stern. Karen's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced at Donovan, searching for a lifeline. "Not guilty, Your Honor," the attorney replied, his voice unwavering. The judge nodded, his expression unreadable. "Very well. In that case, we will proceed with the trial." As the proceedings unfolded, Karen listened in stunned silence as the hotel staff and other witnesses testified, recounting in vivid detail the humiliation and anguish she had inflicted upon them. The video footage, which had gone viral in the days since the incident, only served to corroborate their accounts, painting a damning portrait of her entitled and abusive behavior. Sitting in the courtroom, Karen felt a growing sense of shame and remorse. She had always believed that her wealth and status made her immune to the consequences of her actions, but now she was being forced to confront the harsh reality that her behavior had deeply affected those around her. When it came time for her to testify, Karen found herself struggling to find the words. Gone was the confident, unapologetic woman who had once commanded a room with a mere gesture. In her place was a humbled, almost fragile figure, her eyes downcast and her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt anyone," she stammered, her gaze flitting between the judge and the gallery. "I was just trying to ensure that I received the level of service I expected as a paying guest." The judge regarded her with a solemn expression. "Ms. Bradshaw, the evidence paints a very different picture. Your actions were not merely a matter of expecting good service. They were a clear abuse of power and a violation of the fundamental rights of the hotel staff." Karen felt her heart sink, and she knew in that moment that there was no way to escape the consequences of her actions. She had been so consumed by her own sense of entitlement that she had completely disregarded the humanity of those around her. And now she was being forced to face the full weight of that realization. As the judge handed down his sentence, a significant fine, community service, and a probationary period, Karen felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, and she finally had the opportunity to reflect on the damage she had caused and the changes she needed to make. In the days and weeks that followed, Karen found herself grappling with a newfound humility and empathy. She reached out to the hotel staff, offering sincere apologies and making amends through her community service work. And slowly, she began to understand the importance of treating others with respect and dignity, regardless of their social or professional status. The experience had been a profound and life-altering one for Karen, and as she looked to the future, she knew that she would never again take her privilege and power for granted. The consequences of her actions had taught her a valuable lesson, and she was determined to use that knowledge to become a better, more compassionate person. In the end, Karen's story had become a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the most entitled and powerful can be brought low by their own reckless behavior. And for Karen, that was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life.